The Coromandel coast is defined by its edges. Beneath these restless waves lie ridges of stone that have claimed ships for centuries. For a sailor caught here after sunset, safety depended entirely on a single point of light. That light was maintained by Elias. He lived in a cottage furnished with a wooden table, a narrow bed, and a coat patched with so many different scraps of cloth that the original color had long been forgotten. His life was measured in 127 stone steps. Every evening, he climbed them with a brass lantern. Every night, he recorded the tides and the names of the vessels that passed his cliff. The people on those ships never saw the man who lit the wick. They simply saw the glow and steered away from the rocks, trusting a stranger they would never meet to keep a promise he had never spoken aloud. This rhythm was interrupted by a polished carriage and a merchant named Victor. Victor didn't care for the light. He cared for the valuable cliffside land the lighthouse occupied. Victor placed a leather pouch on the table. Gold and silver coins spilled across the wood and onto the red floor. It was more money than Elias had seen in a lifetime of service. This map shows the merchant's reasoning. Modern shipping routes were already drifting south toward a larger harbor. Victor argued that the lighthouse had become a relic, a redundant guard for waters that fewer and fewer captains were choosing to navigate. With that pouch, Elias could finally fix his leaking roof. He could buy wool for the winter and eat without counting every copper. He could live the rest of his years in the warmth of the town, rather than the spray of the sea. There was no risk. Elias was the only one who signed the logbook. If the light stayed dark for a few nights, he could simply write that the oil was burned and the duty was met. No one would ever come to the cliff to check. Victor left the money on the table. The room grew quiet, leaving Elias alone with the coins and the approaching dusk. For the first time in his life, the walk to the tower steps didn't feel like a routine. It felt like a weight. The storm arrived before the sun had fully set. Rain lashed against the terracotta tiles, and the wind rattled the window frames. Outside, the sea was turning into a wall of white spray and darkness. Inside, the cottage was still. Elias looked at the gold, then at the lantern. The leaking roof dripped water into a bucket in the corner, a steady reminder of everything the money could fix. He thought about his aching shoulders and the cold wind waiting for him on the stairs. He thought about the journals filled with the names of strangers who would never know if he stayed by the fire. He opened the logbook to a new page. It was perfectly white. A single sentence could end his poverty, and no one in the world would be able to prove the ink was a lie. He looked at his own reflection in the darkened window.
He had to decide if he was the man who kept the light, or the man who took the gold. The choice wasn't happening on the cliff or in a court of law. It was happening in the silence of a small room, where the only witness was the person he would have to live with tomorrow morning. Elias picked up the lantern. The brass handle was cold. He left the coins on the table and stepped out into the rain. The climb took everything he had left. 43 steps, 79, 102. The wind tried to pull the lantern from his grip, but he pressed his shoulder against the freezing stone and kept moving. At the top, he struck the flint. His hands were numb, but the spark caught the wick. The flame took hold, reflecting off the polished glass. The beacon threw a sharp, steady beam through the gray sheets of the monsoon, cutting a path across the water. Far beyond the cliffs, a passenger vessel had been pushed off course by the gale. The captain was minutes away from the Hinnon Reefs when the light appeared through the rain. He saw the warning and steered for open water. Every family on that ship survived because of a light they couldn't explain. They thanked the sea and the captain's luck, unaware of the old man catching his breath at the top of a village began its day. No one came to the cottage to thank Elias. No one knew there was anything to thank him for. Victor returned as the sun came up. He looked at the table and saw the pouch of gold, untouched and exactly where he had left it. Elias didn't offer a grand speech. He simply pushed the gold back toward the merchant and admitted he had almost taken it. He had stared at those coins for hours. The hardest person to hide the truth from, Elias said quietly, is the one waiting for you when the room becomes quiet. Victor took the money and left. Elias sat at his table and listened to the waves. The roof still leaked, and his coat was still thin, but the restlessness of the night before had vanished.
Eventually, the lighthouse went dark for good, replaced by satellites and automated signals that didn't need a man to climb the stairs. Now, visitors come to see the tower as a museum. They look at the old brass lantern in its glass case, and some stop to read a single page from a journal kept by a man whose name most have forgotten. The entry doesn't mention the storm or the ship he saved. It only says, "Every night, the light was for strangers. Every morning, the peace was for me." That peace is available to anyone who has stood in a quiet room and had to choose between what is easy and what is right. It is built one honest choice at a time. Rewards like wealth or applause can be taken away, but the quiet satisfaction of integrity remains. As the old proverb reminds us, a clear conscience is the reward of a righteous life.